Dear listeners, most of us have been told the same thing our whole lives, that start with your why. Know your purpose, find your reason. But what if? What if the reason keeps moving? What if you cannot trust your why factor because you haven't been honest about your who factor? I know most of you are thinking about why are we keep saying why and who, all those things. But just hold your horses, because today we'll be talking about a very deep topic. And so the conversation is definitely going to challenge something that you thought you already knew about yourself. And it might be exactly what you needed to hear. So, here, dear listeners, welcome back to another powerful episode of Mind Meets Machine, the podcast where we explore the intersection of human thinking, modern challenges, and the kind of self awareness that actually changes things. I'm your host, Avik, and I'm genuinely glad that all of you are here today. And my guest today, please welcome. Before I say that, before I say that, he has built products that sit on the shelves in over 3,700 retail stores, including Home Depot and Louis. So he's a lead coach in the True North Resiliency Program, and he is writing a book called The Guardians of Grit. And his philosophy is deceptively simple, but deeply powerful. Never start with why, start with who. So I'll not take much of your time. So please welcome our guest, David. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, Avi, great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So, David, like before we get into the big stuff, I want to ask something that I don't always open with. Like, you have built things, coached people, and now you are writing a book for fathers raising sons. Where in all of that did you first realize that you were the common thread in everything going sideways? I mean, if you can share it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's interesting. I think for most people, right?
Hmm.
You launch out into life. I'm 52 now, and you launch out into life, and some of it is survival mode. You're just trying to survive, right? I got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I got to provide for my family. And you just kind of start throwing stuff at the wall to see if it fits and all that kind of stuff. And after a while, though, you start to, or my story is, I just kind of started to run you know, a bit dry. Like didn't have much gas in the tank. And so I felt like my why was just not super clear. And I was introduced about 10 years ago to a friend of mine, Dr. Andy Garrett, who I work with now. He's a clinical psychologist, and he made a comment one time. He said, if you haven't built some self-awareness, like what makes me different from the person next to me? Like, why am I different from my mom and dad and my brother and sister and, things like that? Like, what is it that makes me tick? What is it that causes my energy to rise? And then he started introducing me to all of the various things that make us, that unique piece, right? And
Yeah.
we think of things like values. We talk about core values a lot, but what is it that my core, right, my soul happens to value most of all in this life? The hierarchy of things, right? Those things that really rise to the top. And, then you think of convictions and virtues, like what type of an impact do you want to have on other people? And what are your strengths and how do you want to apply those things? And there's a lot that goes into it, that helps you to identify, the word identity, who you are. And I so here's what's interesting too is we have to kind of submit to a few things. Meaning what? I didn't make me, right? I didn't choose my
Yeah.
skin color, where I was born, right? You're in India, I'm in the United States. I
Yeah.
didn't choose what family I was born into. I didn't choose my eye color, my taste buds. And here's the fascinating thing, we really don't choose even our own personalities. We like to
Exactly.
think we do because we have the ability to think about our thinking, right? With consciousness, right? We can think about thinking. Heck, we can think about thinking about thinking. I mean, it's kind of a fascinating thing. But the weird thing is if you look at little children, when they're 0 to 5 or 6 years old, or they're not thinking about their why. They're not thinking about identity and authenticity and mission and purpose and all this kind of thing. They're just doing their deal and acting, right, inside of their authentic, authored nature. And of course, we get out into life and stuff starts getting tricky, right? I mean, you get picked on, you get bullied, you get, made fun of, or, whatever, the hardship of life starts to hit you. And then you start to play a bit of a role. When I do X, Y, and Z, things work. When I do X, Y, and Z, things don't work. Whether that's literally with a job or something or with a particular person. And I get some applause if I do X, Y, and Z, or I get laughed at or, you know, disciplined or whatever. And so what I think is interesting is that when you start to identify, literally just write down those things that really rise to the top for you individually, well then all of a sudden your why becomes your why. No, it's and otherwise your why might be your dad's or your brother's or somebody you just somebody you admire, because you don't have a sense of yourself. And so I think it's really important to do that. And one of the things that I love, and most people who know me, I use this quote a lot. Benjamin Disraeli said, "The greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own." And I love this idea of holding up a mirror to someone, and especially my wife and kids and my friends, right? Like, hey, you're awesome. Do you see what I see? We need someone on the outside to love us, to validate us, to name those riches in us, especially when we're children, right? We need to be raised, not just provided for. There's a big
Yeah,
difference between someone just providing for you in a general sense of safety and someone who is causing you to rise into a life that is powerful and good and mission focused. So yeah, I'm all about it. It makes the kind of stuff that gets me pretty excited.
that's really amazing. So I definitely want to talk about the misconception part. Like, here's something I find fascinating about your work is that the world has been saying, find your why for years now. Like, Simon Sinek made it almost a kind of gospel. So, and you are standing there saying, no, stop. That's the wrong starting point. So, I mean, if you walk me through that, like, what was the misconception that everyone, almost everyone carries into their own personal growth?
Yeah, and of course Simon's book is fantastic. I'm having a little fun with this, right? I mean, it's
Okay.
not taking away from what he did. There, he's probably a smarter man than I am, but I do think that again, you just need to tap the brakes and look in the mirror, right? And have someone else. Really, you have to have other people that walk along with you to help you begin to identify those things. You've probably heard that phrase, when you're inside the jar, you can't read your own label. You need someone to read your label. But what is that, right? That's your dad, that's your mom, that's hopefully your older siblings, just saying, hey, man, what you did yesterday when you said this or did this, I can tell that came from a really deep place. And by the way, that landed really well on all of us. Like, that was a really good thing. I can tell you care deeply about that. Like, you're passionate about this particular thing. I mean, we get the word passion from the word suffer, right? What are you willing to suffer for? Well, that says a lot about what you care about and what you value. So, it's some of it is quite practical. Some of it is very easy. I mean, for instance, you probably have done this too, where you write your own eulogy. Like, what do you want people to say about you when you die, like at your funeral, or after the fact for that matter. And it's amazing what rises to the top on what you value most of all. Like, what type of an impact do I want to be? What do I really care about? What
Yeah.
don't I care about? How about that? That's a big deal. So yeah, I think to do some self awareness and then surround yourself with people who can hold up a mirror and help you to stay on that path, because we live in a broken world, right? The world, I mean, severely broken. Not only on a very practical level, if I don't sleep well, I get up in the morning and I'm like, man, who the heck am I today? You know what I mean? Like, we're so human. We're so gloriously human, and we need people to support us and love us, and we also need to do that for others.
Absolutely. And when someone does start with why, what tends to happen? Like, where does it break down for them?
Yeah, I think that there's a potential, right? So
Okay.
I'm not saying that you might be able to start with why and actually get really close to the who, right? So
Yes.
I'm not saying that that can't be a. I mean, you need to start somewhere, and if you don't understand kind of the identity authenticity piece, why is the next closest thing, and it's so you might land right on it. I mean, you might get really close, so that's okay. But what I'm saying is what if you're not? What if you're so insecure? What if you have so many question marks inside of you that your why is now someone else's that you kind of admire? And you're going to start going down a road that's going to lead to feeling apathetic and avoidant and stuck and maybe anxious, or you go too long and you're going to feel, depressed. Like, man, I am spending all of my energy just trying to drum up some kind of emotion around something that I care about, but you know what? I really don't. And that's a tough road. You can waste a lot of years doing that.
Yeah. And so the why becomes unstable because it's sitting on a foundation that we haven't examined. And we are answering a question before we understand the person asking it. So that's a quite and but enormous insight. So also would love to get into the root causes. Like in your coaching, I mean, my curiosity is basically in your coaching work, when you sit with someone and start helping them understand like who they actually are at that granular level that you talk about, and what tends to show up that surprises them. So what's underneath that surface that most people haven't looked for?
It's interesting. There's so much, but the thing that really
Uh-huh.
came to mind as you were saying that is, if how about this? I'll back into it this way. If you
Okay.
don't if you don't know someone,
Yeah.
what's there to love, right? If you say, you have a friend and you say, "Man, I love you." Well, what if you only see them once a year? What if you've only met them 5 times? You don't really know them.
Mm.
I mean, you don't know what lights them up. You don't know their sense of humor. You don't know what they care about, what gives them goosebumps, what makes them weep. The same goes for yourself. If so I think the fascinating thing is when and I use this phrase a lot when I'm coaching somebody, I say, "Let me introduce you to yourself." Well, guess what? Now there's someone to love. Now there's someone to care for, as opposed to, a vague understanding that I'm a human doing and not a human being. And, you start to, you know, s- uh, and sadly, there's a lot of people that have just never had anybody hold up a mirror and say, "Hey, you're made of awesome."
Yeah.
They don't believe it. They don't like themselves. They don't love
Uh-huh.
themselves. In fact, I think a lot of people walk around with a real heavy sense of disgust,
Uh-huh.
about who they are, and it's tragic.
And in your own story, you have talked about doing it all wrong and eventually asking for help. So, what was the pattern underneath your own struggles that took the longest to see?
Yeah, and obviously I'm still growing and learning and course correcting. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Andy talks a lot about course correcting. Like when a
Mhm.
plane, leaves Mumbai and it's, headed to whatever, Cape Town or something, right? It's
Uh-huh.
constantly course correcting. It's only on target, I think they say, like 3% of the time, because the wind is blowing and the altitude is shifting, and so you're constantly course correcting. So I think that, as you grow and you have a deeper understanding of, who you are and whose you are on an eternal level, well, then all of a sudden it's like, I know who I'm course correcting to. I believe that God made us in his image. And there's a lot of clues surrounding that, right? The same God that made Neptune and, Venus and lightning and hurricanes and tornadoes and koala bears, made us. And there's some clues there that really we need to tap the brakes and look at. Like, oh my gosh, that guy says I am made in his image. I mean, there's better at least tap the brakes and start asking some better questions.
And okay, so if you talk about the real life part, I mean everything, not the big pivots or maybe dramatic rock bottom moments, just the ordinary Tuesday. So today is Tuesday, okay, right? So what does being your own way actually look like on a regular day? Like in business, in relationships, in the decisions like someone makes before they even realize that they are making them. So what do you say?
Yeah, so I love this idea when you really understand all of those
Mm.
things, values, convictions, virtues, goosebumps, strengths, and you've written them down. I know Andy Garrett, Dr. Garrett says, I've predetermined what I'm going to say yes to and no to in advance of an obstacle or an opportunity. So, it's like this, I think it's Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this. So you have a really clear sense of what does somebody like me do in a situation like this. And, so here we are on a Tuesday morning. And honestly, I woke up this morning and the alarm went off and I'm like, oh man, it's time to go work out, go to the gym and I meet a friend of mine there for some accountability. And again, I put those things in place because I know that someone like me, if I'm not meeting somebody at the gym, I don't go. So I need to have some accountability. I need to have some support. And here's what's fascinating. I think that what really gets me to show up at the gym is that I'm actually meeting someone. He's kind of a mentor of mine that I really like being with. Like he's wild, smart, he's funny. Like we just have such a great time. So, so what am I saying there? I've already predetermined that yes, I need some support and accountability. But you know what? I value relationships with people who are awesome. So I'm stacking those things together because then when I go to the gym, it's not, well, I got to, I have to do this and I'm feeling like some kind of a victim. No, I'm showing up to treat myself well and I get to enjoy a good friend and some good conversation.
Okay. And I mean, if you talk about the resilience, right, which is central to everything that you teach. So, what does it look like when someone is practicing it well? Like, not just surviving, but actually building something that holds.
Yeah. So I love that. I've never heard somebody use that phrase, like building something that holds.
Yeah.
That makes me think of, I'm actually going to write that down, building something that holds. Okay. So I was actually at an event last week down in Dallas, and a
Okay.
guy gave an analogy of talking about rock climbers. So when they're scaling a face of a rock, they have these, the belays and these different, anchor points that they'll put
Hmm.
in the crevice of a rock so they can, pull their weight on it. And it makes me think of words like steadfastness, grit, resilience, and this idea of what you said of, holding. And, so again, I really think that, if you haven't predetermined these things, like what am I standing on? What are my
Yeah.
values? What is it that makes me steadfast? How about this? What are the big fat rocks that are holding me, right? Am I standing on sinking sand or am I standing, on words like dignity and honor and kindness and, fairness and, and things like that. So I think that on a very practical level, we have to determine the big rocks that we're standing on that are holding us, by the way, because guess what? Like I said earlier, if I get up in the morning and I haven't slept or I've got a cold or something like that, it's amazing how intellectually, things can kind of go out the window and I start sliding.
True. Very true. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, resilience is not a kind of armor. It's most like the roots, the deeper, the more self-aware that you are, the less obviously you get knocked over. So, um, I mean, practically, like, if someone is listening, or maybe they will also listen later, maybe a founder, maybe dad, maybe a person who's been running on empty and operations on autopilot, what is the first honest and conversation they need to have with themselves? Like, if I say about the question, like, what will be the question that actually starts the whole work?
Yeah. You know what? I think there's a question before that. And I think that quite often, those of us who, and I've been there so many times and I still dip my toe in that water, but if you're running on empty, it might be because you need some sleep. It might be because you need some food. it might be very practical, right? We are mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly.
So what I would hate to do is if somebody comes into my office, for some coaching,
Yeah.
I would hate to just start throwing a bunch of deep work at them
Mm,
when they just need to take a nap, when
exactly.
their body, when they need a safe space just to be. So I think to letting someone just sit in a safe space and let the adrenaline and cortisol and all the stuff running in their body just kind of simmer down a little bit.
Mhm,
That's really the most important thing. And even now, when I'm feeling like I'm off, it's
mm,
usually quite often a very physical thing that I need to kind of calm my body down so that my brain can even work.
yeah.
So anyway, I think then a larger question too then might be in that moment, what do you really want? Like what is it that that sets your soul on fire? And I use those kind of more explosive language because I want someone to get to that explosive place in their soul. I mean, if you ask somebody, well, what do you want in life? Well, okay, they'll rattle off a few things. But if you ask somebody, Avi, when you put your head down tonight, on your pillow and you're rehearsing everything that went on today, what are those things that you wish you could set down? And what are those things that you wish you could like turn up the volume on because when you do or say these particular things or you're with these certain types of people really cause your heart to grow and like wow that was fun, wow I felt like me, wow I felt totally alive. And it's so that's I think that just to start on a more of a macro higher level, like what do you hate, what don't you want to do anymore, and what is it that causes your joy to rise.
And is there a moment like a signal, a feeling, situation where you say that this is when you stop and ask for the help? Because a lot of people listening have crossed that line and you don't know yet as well. So, um, decide.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a constant, process. I think that every day we get up and, I forget who said it, but somebody said every day is a new life. And I think experientially for me, to be present in the moment, because I'm always one who's looking for the next thing and getting excited about, something a week or two down the road or more. And I think that, you know, every day is a new life. And I really believe right now is what matters. So to be kind to yourself and to, kind of self-assess and to, and how about this? Those of us who are parents, I don't know, do you have children? So, we will do just about anything to keep our kids from hanging out with the wrong crowd, right? Because your kids, I mean, they'll become just like the troublemakers. But here's the funny thing, we don't think about that for ourselves quite often. So I think that one of the things that we need to be just really adamant about is who we are spending a lot of time with because we become like them, we think like them. I don't want to be hanging out with people who are negative and who are pessimistic and we're always trying to find the faults and that kind of stuff. I want to hang out with people who are talking about goals and ideas and about expansion and mission and love and family and building something. And so,
So, like, here's something I think about a lot is like, because transformation is one thing, but staying transformed is another thing as well. So, you can have a breakthrough, understand yourself better, start showing up differently, and then life happens. You fall back into old patterns, it can repeat also. So, what do you say to someone who's been doing the walk and still find themselves back to square one?
yeah. So two things. I would say we do not live and we will never live in a utopia, right? We are
Okay.
not home. We are not. So I'm a Christian. We are not home. This is not my home, right? It will be one day when it is made new and when I am made new. But we
Yeah.
have to acknowledge that we live in a broken world. So what's fascinating is quite often the expectation, the reason I'm upset or the reason I'm sad or disillusioned is because I have some expectation that life is going to be perfect. It's not. So we have to set the expectation that I was born into a world that's broken and a world at war.
Yeah.
And not only am I at war with people around me sometimes, I'm at war with myself, right? We often tell ourselves, we say the meanest things to ourselves we would never tell our neighbor, right? Or our worst enemy for that matter. So I think that just to set expectations is really important. But here's something else I think is, again, we're mind, body, and spirit. So if you feel like you get up in the morning and you're like, wow, yesterday I felt like I was so mission oriented. Now I don't even care about anything. Well, join the club, right? That is absolute humanity. And there's no one that doesn't struggle with that. But again, I think after you've identified, the who, now the why needs you need to treat yourself kindly. You need to calm down, right? Care for your mind and your body and your spirit, and then reorient to that plumb line. So I've identified that plumb line that is inside of me. Things like, like my core values, what are my faith in God, inspiration, which means breathe life into. I love impact, like literally, I like to see, the David Osk shaped impact on someone around me. I like community and I like beauty. So if I'm not operating in kind of those, top five core values on a regular basis, well, I better at least have the sense to ask the question, why am I feeling so depleted? It's because I'm operating over here and all of this other stuff that I don't really care about. It's not to say that there's not moments on any given day that you have to do that kind of thing, or any given week or month. Life can be hard. But I think in general, we need to ask better questions. If I'm feeling depleted, it's probably because I'm operating in a capacity that is just draining my energy because it's not me.
Yeah. Exactly. That's amazing. So, David, like if you have to give one advice to the listeners today, what that will be?
Yeah, might sound kind of cheesy or something, but you need to surround yourself with awesome people who love you,
Yeah.
and hold up a mirror and say, you are made of awesome.
Yeah.
And I want to start identifying all of that gold in you and draw it out and name it, call it forth, and to help you run in your lane. I don't want you to be like, I mean, when you think about, my kids, right? I don't want to tell them, what's the worst thing you could say to your son? It's, why can't you be like your older brother? Or why can't you be like
Yeah.
this? No, I don't want Parker to be like me. I want him to be who God made him to be in all of his beautiful and wonderful uniqueness, because he's going to feel authentic and feel natural and normal and resilient and free, and as opposed to trying to play some other role. So yeah, I think that's kind of the
Amazing. And if someone wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
yeah. So I haven't. I've done a bit of a soft launch, but if you go to theaskexperience.com, I have a podcast that we just launched, and that's kind of my mission there. And hopefully we'll have the book out later this year too.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links and the details into the show notes for your easy reference so that you can easily reach out to David. And with this hope, that's the wrap of today's episode of Mind Meets Machine. And if something David said is still sitting with you, don't rush past it. That feeling is, I would say, information. Sit with it, write about it, maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it about, or maybe someone you know, someone you are very connected with, you love the most, just share with them. You can find David's details into the show notes, as I mentioned. And if this conversation meant something to you, I'd love for you to share it, not to grow the numbers, but because someone in your life might genuinely need this today. With this hope, this is your host, Avik, and this is Mind Meets Machine. Take care of your mind, and it's the only one you have got. So, see you next time. Thank you so much.